today I will go through the basics of the Matomo Tag Manager and also the basics of getting consent management to work together with the Matomo Tag Manager. For those interested in the tracking of SPA applications, I will do that tomorrow. All right, so let's look into what this is. But let's first talk a little bit about me. As the introduction said, I've been working with analytics since 2010-ish. I usually refer to myself as some kind of a generalist when it comes to web development. I started working within the web industry around 2000 and has had a mix of roles. I started off as a front-end developer, but today I'm more of a business developer, but I still love the coding, so I can't get my fingers away from the commit messages, so to speak. So what I usually do on my daily job is to help our clients at Digitalist with implementing Matomo in their organizations. And that can be everything from helping out with tag management issues or more technical deep dives or educating or training developers or whatever that needs to learn about Matomo. So who are Digitalist? Well, we're a digital product agency that loves open source. I think we've been contributing to different open source projects since 2005. And our main project to contribute to has been Drupal, where we are pretty well known within the Drupal community, the CMS. But the 3-4 last years, we've been starting to contribute more and more to Matomo, and we hope to do much more of that as well. What we offer as a company is, of course, a SaaS solution for Matomo and professional consulting to help people with that. We're also building and selling premium plugins to Matomo, so that's something we will hopefully share more news about soon. I have a presentation about one of them tomorrow, called the user feedback plugin. But that's for tomorrow. So let's get into today's topic, and that is tag management. Tag management isn't super new in the Matomo world. It is, but basically tag management, a tag manager is a tool that helps us structure the tracking code that we can add to our websites. Once we have it installed, it means that we can implement tracking without actually changing code in our CMS system or on the production servers. We can do that through the tool Tag Manager. Why should we use a Tag Manager? Well, first of all, it gives us autonomy. We don't have to depend on developers or ops team to actually implement new tracking. And this is actually a great thing, because if you're working with tracking, it's usually a lot of fast, short-term jobs we need to apply. We need to maybe meet a campaign that has a tight deadline, or start to track things and continuously improve what we're doing. So tag management is great from that perspective. Tag management also gives us a better visual structure of what we're doing on our site. So by using it, we can actually jump between websites and learn pretty well and understand how things has been done. And we don't have to invent the wheel over and over again. So that means that the quality will actually be better. And this, of course, leads to better security and quality, less loading time. Often, since we don't invent the wheel, the code that is implemented through the Tag Manager is fast and consistent. And of course, we can be faster with our development and applying new changes to our websites. The concept of tag management has 3 components, basically. We talk about tags, triggers, and variables. And together with these 3 components, we can build pretty much anything once we start to learn how it works. First of all, triggers are actually connected to events in browsers. So events can be such a thing as reloading a page, clicking on something, or if the user scrolls or submits a form, or basically anything that has to be with interaction on a page or in a browser. Tags are the actual code that we are executing. And this can also be pretty much anything. We have predefined code snippets within the TagManager that help us, for instance, to do the Matomo tracking. But as my example here in the presentation shows, we can basically execute any type of code like the alert hello world. Finally, we can use variables to fetch data from the page or the browser and use that data within our tags or the triggers to create logic. Altogether, they create a really, really nice way to structure our tracking. So let's look at the next example. I'm actually going to demo how to set up tracking in Matomo. So I'm going to go to Matomo's Tag Manager, and what we're going to look at here is the default setup for page view tracking. So to do that, you basically have to click here to create a new tag. You select the tag type called Matomo Analytics. And as I explained before, this actually means that when you click on any of these, you're getting pre-written code. And if you click on this tag Matomo Analytics, I'm actually going to go back and click on the one I already created. You're getting a set of predefined configurations. So in this case, I'm going to track data to Matomo, and I'm going to track page views, the thing we normally start with when we implement a new website. As you can see here, I have a lot of different fields that I can change and configure. But in this case, we're doing it really easy. The second thing I need to do here is to tell the Matomo Tag Manager when to execute this code. And as you see here, I already selected page view. And if I click on this little button, I can actually start to edit it. And this is, of course, when a user reloads the page, I want to send a new page view to Matomo so that we can track that within our website. So it's pretty simple, actually. Let's see. Do we have any variables? Yes. In Matomo, we also have a variable that helps us to get the standard data that decides what to send. So in this variable, for instance, we can set up things like if I want to disable cookies, or if I want to send beacons, which is a quite techy setup, but we can also force requiring a consent here. So this is a pretty nice way to start off with. So I'm going to go back to my presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a more detailed case, which is tracking users without asking for a consent. And the background to this task, which is pretty common, is that GDPR requires us to ask for consent from users before we start to track them. And this relates to that GDPR is describing that if you're storing personal data or if you do profiling, you need to ask for consent. So we're looking a bit to what that really means. Yeah, so personal data is, of course, the IP address in many cases. But the reason why we want to do tracking without consent is that, of course, if we start to ask consent from all the users, we will lose a lot of data, depending on how your website is set up. So the interpretation of GDPR that many organizations do is that if we implement cookie-free tracking, we can actually track users without having the consent, which is, of course, nice if you want to have correct data on your website. So what is actually profiling in Matomo? Well, when a user visits your website for the first time, we set a cookie, and that cookie contains a little number, which is the visitor ID, and that ID is stored in Matomo together with the data we collect. So the next time a user visits your site, Matomo script can find that cookie, and it will actually start adding data to the already created profile in Matomo, so that we're building a profile in Matomo. It looks like this if you look in the interface. So you can see here, like, there is a visit number 1 and visit number 2, and the data collected from that user is stored to the same profile. And this is what GDPR talks about, that it requires a consent if you start to do that. So the solution is, of course, to not do profiling. And that means that when a user visits you the first time, we are not setting persistent cookies, meaning the data stored in Matomo is connected to a session cookie only. So the next time the user gets there, we don't have any persistent cookie that can connect that ID to any previous visits. So we create a new profile in Matomo, and this is actually the definition of profiling. So we can avoid that through having Matomo to not set these cookies. So let's look into how to do this. Step by step, you need to basically disable cookies by default. You need to identify the consent, and this is usually happening through the CMS. So we need to know if someone clicked the consent dialog button or similar. And then we need to have some kind of logic to execute some particular functions in Matomo. I will show you pretty soon. That will, if the user has given a consent, we will actually start setting cookies. And the reason we want to set cookies is that is because it's sometimes nice to have that extra information we get from cookies, to be able to see recurring visits, because if you're using Matomo without cookies or persistent cookies, basically every user will be reported as a new visitor. And when you're starting to analyze your application, it's often nice to know and perhaps create segments of recurring visitors, or visitors that has been to the site more than 10 times, etc. So this is, of course, nice to do if we have the consent. So that's the background to why we usually want to do this as well. So first of all, you go to your Matomo configuration variable. We looked at it here before. It's basically this little checkbox, so we can click disable cookies. And we can also check another checkbox further down. Now it's a bit up, where we're forcing, let's see. Okay, now I missed that. But this one, I'm actually going to do it manually. Sorry for being confusing. But we start by disabling cookies like this. The second step is to identify the cookie consent from our CMS. Now I'm looking at the European Commission site, and normally we have a button like this that says accept all cookies, and that's the behavior we want to start looking into. So when that happens, we want to identify this somehow. And to do so, I usually create a variable that reads that cookie information from the browser. And by doing so, I can create a new logic so that if the cookie is set, basically, I can execute that we have a consent given to Matomo, which is the yes option down here. And when we're doing so, Matomo will start setting cookies. And if we don't have the consent, or actually on every other page view, we will run the code above that requires us to get a cookie consent. So that in combination with the track without cookies will give us the wanted behavior. So let's jump to the next step. The final step is to do a trigger, as I said, that if we have the cookie consent, we will execute this little code. And let's look at how that looks in the... So what I have done here is that I have a Matomo configuration variable, as we looked into before, where I have disabled cookies. I also created a tag, or several tags. The first one is require consent. This one will always be executed, and the only thing it does is to run a custom JavaScript saying require consent. The second logic is that if consent is given, which my trigger I talked about is here, I'm going to execute this code. Remember, cookie consent given. And the trigger I configured in this case is that we're looking at the value from the cookie, and this one is actually configured to work with the European Commission site, and I will show you that in a while. It's actually a bit advanced. So looking at this site, and I have to go to code inspection and go to our cookies. And there is actually a cookie called CK1, and they have an array of data in this one. So CM equals true means that we have a consent. So if I remove this one and reload the page, I will probably see the cookie consent again. So reading this one now, we have CM false. So as long as that one is false, I will not execute the script cookie consent given. As you see here, Matomo already stored this, so I can actually remove that cookie. And hopefully if I reload the page, we can see that we don't get the Matomo cookies. But as soon as I do that and reload the page, we're going to get the Matomo cookie consent stored, and we're also setting the persistent cookies from Matomo. So in this way, we're able to track the consent and handle the cookie-less tracking for users that hasn't been giving a consent. Let's see. So one thing that I can share as well is that I'm not working with the European Commission and helping them with Matomo, but instead I am using a little plugin in my Chrome browser that helped me to simulate tracking on basically any site I would like to play with. The little plugin is called User JavaScript and CSS, and if I click this one, I can add both JavaScript and CSS that will be running in my browser on basically any site. So you can see it's connected to this domain. So what I usually do here is that I go to the TagManager, I go to the install code section, I grab this JavaScript, I add it to this site, and then basically press save. And by doing so, I can also make sure that it's green up here. I know that I will always execute this script on this site. So that's a great way to simulate tracking. Let's see. So let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, we looked at the demo, and actually this was a pretty quick demonstration. I will do a bit more advanced advanced session tomorrow, displaying how to track single page applications. So right now I'm going to open up for questions and details about this. I hope to be able to share the presentation with you guys afterwards. So let's go ahead with questions.
Yeah, thank you. So if there are any questions, please type them out now so that I can ask them and we can answer them.
Okay, seems to be quite quiet. Now we get one question maybe. Okay, where to disable cookies. Good. So when you go into the TagManager, you usually have a variable called the Matomo configuration. And when you edit that one, you scroll down and you will find this little checkbox, disabled cookies. Or maybe I should do this actually from scratch. That's actually, I'm actually going to create a new TagManager container and just do it from an empty container so you can follow it step by step. So now I have a totally empty TagManager. So what I usually start with is to create a Matomo tracking tag. So I want to track page views. I'm not going to do much more now, but before, normally here you select the Matomo configuration variable. So I will click on this one. This will actually bring up a new variable and pretty much everything pre-filled. I will check the disabled cookies. And I will scroll down and just create that variable. So now my page view tag is connected to the Matomo configuration variable. The last thing I need to do is to create the trigger. I will click on page view because that's when I want to fire it and create it. So basically, and I need to create a tag. So if I publish this, I can give it a version name of 1. I basically have page views running. So I have a tag executing that. I have a trigger for page views. And in this case, I only have one variable containing the Matomo configuration. So if I install this code now and go back to my European Commission page and we change the JavaScript I use, I have to remove the script tags and we can save it. So to see that it really works now, I need to go to my network tab and I usually filter my IP address. And when I reload this one, I can see that we have a Matomo PHP called and an action name. So I can actually see that this one is sending data to Matomo. Right the cookie store link, so I need to remove this one and reload it again. Yes, so right now we disabled cookies for all the users. And the next step would be to let's see. Just lost my screen here. Okay. The next step would be to create a variable that looks at this cookie. So let's create that variable. We create a variable of the type, where are we? First party cookie. I'm going to go back to my site, and the cookie I want to look for is this one, CCK1. So I'm just going to name it like that, and this is where I actually name the cookie I'm going to look into. And this cookie, in this case, it always exists. If you have a simpler solution that a lot of sites have cookies that either they exist or not. And if that's the solution you have, you can actually set a default value here to not set. That won't matter right now because this cookie is always set. But if you do that, you can use that in your logic for the trigger later on. So I will actually write it like that. So first of all, now we will read that cookie on the page. The next thing I need to do is to require the cookie consent. So that's a JavaScript, and I'm gonna actually copy this code from my other TagManager instance, because now we're gonna do this one. I'm just gonna copy the code here, sorry. Back, so this is the current TagManager. I'm going to create a new tag of the type custom HTML. Require consent. I'm going to paste this script here, require consent. I can then create a trigger. And the trigger I want to use here is DOM ready. That's actually a bit before our page view is triggered, to make sure that we're requiring it before the page view is sent. So creating this tag. Now we're requiring consent, and the last thing would be to set the logic for the consent given. So I will show you how that works, and you're just going to copy the code here again. So going back, creating a new tag of the type custom HTML. Remember consent given. Now we paste it here. And now to the perhaps more trickier part. Now we need to create this custom trigger. We're going to do it on DOM ready. And in this case, I want to look at my previously created variables. So I'm going to go to custom. And here you find my variable called CCK1, which was the cookie consent cookie. So now to the logic, consent given. The easy solution is normally to make it like this. If your solution is that the cookies doesn't exist until you have a consent. You remembered I gave this variable a default value. So if you do it like this, not set. So you're actually going to a negative logic here. So if it doesn't equal not set, we know that we have a consent. But in our example here, the cookie always existed. So I had to create a little bit more advanced regular expression to do that matching. So I had to do a regular expression with not matches to make it work. So that would be, where do we have it? Not matches regular expression. So it can't say CM false, basically. Wait trigger. I could actually write it equal CM true as well. So creating this tag should be what we need. And if I do this, I publish it. And if we go back to this site, let's delete this and reload. Okay, let's remove that as well. Okay, so now I'm looking, and it seems like we're not having the Matomo cookies set. We can see that CM false, and if I click accept on this one, we see that the value changes to CM true. And if I reload now, we can also see that we get the Matomo cookie consent. So that's how it works, basically. Let's see if we have more questions.
So another question is if it is possible with this setup to separate or look into users who didn't give consent.
Well, no, not really. You can only see users that are new, but that is not necessarily the same thing as giving a consent. What you could do is probably to create a dimension in Matomo and store the consent given value and do it that way.
Okay, thank you. Another question, or something that has been discussed in the chat, is if there's a way not to write a version name for every published version of the tags.
Yeah. So I think I showed you. So when I publish something new, if you add a number here to Matomo, it will actually start counting up automatically. So if I publish now, I always start by just writing 1. So every time I create a new version and publish a new release, it will actually be added automatically. So now I created a new version. Probably, if you see it in the version number, it's number 3. And if I click create new version, it will automatically be 4. So that's actually a pretty nice one. And then you don't have to write any descriptions.
Thank you. Another one. If I go back to an earlier published version, are both the tags, triggers, and variables back to the earlier versions?
Yeah. So you can actually, if you go to the version history, you can actually see which version that is published live. And I should probably reload this one. Oh yeah, now I'm looking at different TagManager accounts, I think. This is a bit, but yeah, so here you have more versions. So basically you can go down here and just click on this little icon and publish the old version like this. So now this version will be running in your live production. So that's pretty easy. What I would like to see is a better way to do a diff between versions. To do that right now, at least as far as I know, you basically have to export the configuration here. So that's also a nice thing. You can click on this little icon, and that will actually give you a JSON file containing the current version. But it would be nice to have an interface really telling us what's happening. All right. Anything else?
Okay. Another thing that has been discussed in the chat before. I don't know if the answer is enough yet. It would be, what's the regulation in Sweden regarding the use of Matomo?
There is no regulation in Sweden in terms of Matomo. There is GDPR and there is some other laws in regards to privacy. So right now it's a lot of discussions on how to interpret like what's the judgment to do, as I think that most of the European Union is discussing. So there are no real statements about Matomo, but what we see is that basically the whole public sector in Sweden is leaving Google Analytics, and most of them are moving to Matomo. The discussion I have with a lot of them right now is whether this solution I showed you today is legally okay or not, to actually track users without a consent or not. And that refers more to the cookie law than GDPR.
Thank you for that. I think that's all the questions that have been asked until now. I'm going to wait a few more seconds just to see if another one comes up.
Yeah.
But it would seem that is not the case. So once again, thank you for your talk. And if there are any other more questions, the chat stays open as with the other talks.
I will be available for 10 more minutes here to answer questions or have a dialogue in the chat. So,
Thank you, and have a good evening.
You too.